Welcome back. This course is about Step 4 of the Open Standards for the Practice of Conservation, or the Conservation Standards for short. To recap, the Conservation Standards provide a step-by-step adaptive management approach that helps teams draw on existing evidence and knowledge to design, implement, monitor, and evaluate conservation projects. The Conservation Standards also help teams generate evidence and learn from their own monitoring results so that they can swiftly adapt to changes and new information. This Step 4 course will teach you how to reflect on your team's overall project progress and context, draw on your monitoring data and any new knowledge you have gained since your team started designing and implementing your project. This course focuses on the Analyze and Adapt step of the Conservation Standards and will provide you with vital skills for using the monitoring data and new information to adapt as needed and improve your conservation efforts. In Module 3, you'll learn how to prepare your data for analysis so that you can effectively track your project outcomes. In this module, we'll continue to learn about the essential practices for monitoring strategy effectiveness along your theory of change. In addition to tracking actions as we practiced in Module 2, project teams also need to monitor progress towards achievement of outcomes, which includes expected results, goals, and objectives. This will help you determine if your system is behaving as envisioned in your theory of change, and why or why not. This process involves managing project data as they come in so that they are clean, organized, and available for regular analysis. And this module also provides guidance for completing these steps and an introduction to the latest functions in Marathi for tracking project outcomes. By the end of this module, you'll be able to demonstrate the following skills competencies. You'll be able to describe how a theory of change can help you track project outcomes to inform adaptive management, outline steps to systematically clean and summarize underlying data sets to generate an indicator rating or category for tracking project outcomes, and finally, to use Marathi to record and store project data on progress towards achievement of results, objectives, and goals. In this module, we'll continue to focus on the first bullet point in Step 4, which is preparing your data. As demonstrated in Module 2, preparing data correctly will assure that your team is able to analyze project progress and determine if and how to adapt your plan going forward. This is an essential step in practicing adaptive management. We know from Module 1 that adaptive management is an intentional approach to improving strategy effectiveness by making decisions about and adjustments to your conservation plan. This is usually in response to new information that you may gather from existing sources or new research, as well as evidence you may generate as you implement your monitoring plan or detect changes in project context. In Module 2, we discussed these 3 types of monitoring questions that you and your team should address to evaluate the effectiveness of your strategies and to determine if any adaptive management decisions are needed. As you may recall, each monitoring question requires compiling and tracking different types of data. In this module, we'll focus on compiling and tracking the data required for answering question number 3. Are we achieving the expected outcomes? And if not, why not? To answer our third question, we'll need to track and prepare data on progress towards achievement of results and towards achievement of objectives and goals. What do we achieve by tracking outcomes, which includes tracking progress towards results and progress toward achievement of goals and objectives? Tracking progress towards results will help a team know if actions they are implementing are actually leading to the expected results, as assumed in the theory of change that the results chain represents. And tracking indicators of progress towards objectives and goals will help a team know if they're making progress as expected towards the desired thresholds of change in a contributing factor, a threat, or a target. In addition to monitoring your actions, as discussed in Module 2, it's even more important to monitor progress towards your project's desired outcomes. As shown in this results chain, the project outcomes that you will want to track include results. A result is the desired future status of a factor. This includes tracking progress towards achievement of any intermediate objectives, here shown in blue, and threat reduction objectives, here shown in purple. Objectives. These are the formal statements that represent the desired future status of a specific result. Progress towards achieving the objective is tracked by monitoring change in an indicator status. Goals. These are formal statements that represent the desired future status of a conservation target. Progress towards achieving the goal is tracked by monitoring change in an indicator status. Your objectives and goals represent critical achievements along your theory of change. Collectively, your results, objectives, and goals represent the desired outcomes that a team expects to achieve through implementation of a strategy's activities, which are shown here in yellow. You implement your monitoring activities in purple to track change and the status of indicators for your objectives and goals. As we discussed in Module 2, there are lots of ways to track progress with your team. For example, you can track progress towards achievement of progress outcomes in spreadsheets such as Excel or Google Sheets, in an online diagramming software such as Miro or Mural, or even on sticky tarps or printouts, but ultimately this hard copy data will need to be recorded elsewhere for long-term storage and analysis. In the Step 4 course, you'll learn how to use Marathi for tracking progress towards achieving your project outcomes. You can do this using the desktop version of Marathi or the online Marathi Share editing capabilities. Okay, let's start by discussing how to monitor progress towards achievement of your intermediate and threat reduction results. In the following slides, we'll walk through an example of entering progress updates on project results for one of the strategies in our Eastern Bay Conservation Project. You can start here by selecting Theory of Change to see the results change for this project. Results tracking allows you to track progress updates for your intermediate and threat reduction results. So here you'll want to select the results chain for which you wish to enter the progress updates. In this example, we'll use the Campaign to Stop Shark Fin Soup strategy. This is the Campaign to Stop Shark Fin Soup strategy. And note that the results chain includes intermediate results here shown in blue, a threat reduction result outlined in purple, and the results with specific objectives on them are numbered with blue labels, and the indicator is shown as a purple triangle, as we see here. The results chain diagram also includes a goal and an indicator on our conservation target, and implementation activities shown in these yellow bubbles, with monitoring activities shown in the purple. For our exercise, let's start by showing only the results chain without goals, objectives, indicators, and activities. You can do this by selecting Visibility to indicate any factors you would like to hide. Now, let's start by selecting an intermediate result and then click on that second symbol to open the Factors property box associated with the result. Open the result updates in the Factor Properties box as shown here and click on Add Update to create a new update on progress towards achieving this result. You are now ready to enter a new results update in this screen. Your update should include the date of your update as shown here. Perhaps your team meets on a regularly scheduled day every quarter to enter their updates. If so, you'll want to make sure that this date is consistent with your regularly scheduled meeting dates. Ideally, you should work with your project team to enter a result update for each activity at least one time per year until that result is achieved. Some teams choose to review and update progress every quarter or every 6 months. This may be necessary for some strategies that are new or innovative that require more regular monitoring and adaptive management. Also, it's especially important that you use the Details box to explain your rationale for the result rating and cite the source of evidence for the rating. Your update should also include the status rating of the result and the details associated with that rating. Here you can see the menu of options that's available to select from when you're rating the status of a result. As you go through these options with your team, make sure you select the option that best describes the status of each result. And most importantly, be sure that you provide details about why you've selected a status and if any adaptive management decisions are required. Let's walk through these menu options in a bit more detail to understand this. For example, if you selected Not Yet as a status for your result update, this is indicating that it's too early to expect that desired result. And in the Details field, you may periodically want to provide an estimate of when you expect to see this desired result. If you selected Partially Achieved as the status of your result, this indicates that the desired result has only been partially achieved and/or a mixture of success and failure. In this case, in the details, you'll want to describe any evidence that the result has been partially achieved and/or a description of what was achieved and what was not and why. And then if you chose something like Achieved for your status of your result, this is indicating that the desired result has been successfully achieved at the defined level. And in the details, you'll again briefly describe any evidence that illustrates that the result has actually been achieved. And finally, don't forget to save your result update when completed. Okay, you're now ready to go back and use these steps to enter progress updates for all of your intermediate and threat reduction results. Now that you've seen how to track project results in Marathi, let's take a quick look at another common and familiar option for tracking implementation progress in a spreadsheet, such as Excel or Google Sheets, as shown here. You could recreate something like this that looks like what you might see in Marathi. The nice thing about spreadsheets, as we mentioned earlier, is that you can custom design them as you see fit. The drawback is that you may have project data stored in multiple places. For example, perhaps you're doing your planning and diagramming in Marathi, but you move your tracking to a Google spreadsheet. So any changes you do in one place would then have to be manually replicated in the other system. So you should think carefully about these implications when you're choosing your systems to manage and store your results updates. The next type of data we'll want to track is progress towards achievement of objectives and goals. You'll remember from the introduction to this module that our results chain includes the intermediate and threat reduction results here, and that the specific objectives are numbered with blue labels, and the indicator is shown as a purple triangle, and the goal and the indicator is on the conservation target. As you may recall, an objective is a formal statement that describes the desired outcome of your project, such as reducing a critical threat. Objectives are associated with specific intermediate results and the threat reduction results in your results chain. If the project is well conceptualized and designed, the realization of a project's objectives should lead to the fulfillment of the project's goals. Here's an example of an objective describing the desired outcome of the first intermediate result in our campaign to stop shark fin soup strategy. The objective is, by 2023, more than 50% of the seafood restaurants in the capital city are actively participating in the Stop Shark Fin Soup campaign. Whereas a goal, as shown here, is a formal statement detailing the desired status of a target. Here's a goal describing the desired future status of the sharks in our Eastern Bay project area. By 2030, there are at least 500 adult sharks of each of the two main species in the greater Eastern Bay region. Marathi provides you with two different methods for tracking achievement of objectives and goals. The first is assessing the degree of progress toward an objective or a goal. The second approach is to actually measure the value of one or more of the indicators that represent progress towards completing an objective or goal. So let's start by looking at the first approach of tracking progress percent. Start here by clicking on the desired objective or goal in the results chain and select the objective or goal highlighted in blue to open the factor properties box. Next, open the progress percent update field and click on Add an Update. Your new progress percent update should include the date of the update. Ideally, you should work with your project team to enter that progress percent update for each objective or goal at least one time per year until the objective or goal is achieved. Some teams choose to review and update progress more frequently, every 6 months. This may be necessary for some strategies that are new or innovative that may require more regular monitoring to determine to what extent outcomes are occurring or not, and if some corrective action is needed. Next, record the progress, the percent complete. For example, if our objective is, as seen here, by 2021, more than 50% of the seafood restaurants in the capital city are active participants in the Stop Shark Fin Soup campaign, and if at the time of our updates we know that 65% of the seafood restaurants are active participants, we should record the percent complete as 100, as we've exceeded the target value of greater than 50%. Finally, it's especially important to record details. Here you should provide any evidence for the number you've provided for the percent complete. And for example, in this case, the team recorded that a recent survey of seafood restaurants in the project area found that 65% of the restaurants are now actively participating in the campaign by no longer serving shark fin soup in their restaurants. Now let's look at an example of a progress percent update for a goal. The goal for our sharks target is by 2030, there's at least 500 adult sharks of each of the 2 main species in the greater Eastern Bay region. In the details, in a recent survey at the time of our update, we found 150 adult sharks, which we would record the progress percent complete as 12.5%. In the details, it's important to explain how you calculated the percent complete and what was the result and what the result may represent as far as achievement of the goal. In this example, our baseline was, as we state here in the details, the baseline was 100 adult sharks at the start of the project, and our desire was to increase that population to 500 adult sharks by the end of the project, which is an increase of 400 adult sharks over the life of the project. At this point in the project, we've observed an increase of 50 adult sharks since our baseline survey. Thus, our goal is 12.5% complete, or 50 divided by 400. However, given our evidence of progress across all project results, we've also recorded in the details that we're not sure if this increase in adult sharks is due to our interventions or if it might be due to normal fluctuations in the shark population. And finally, as noted here, don't forget to save your progress percent update for your objective or goal when completed. As shown previously, you can also track progress percent for an objective or goal in a spreadsheet, such as Excel or Google Sheets as illustrated here. Here you can see a comparison between the 2 different approaches for tracking progress towards outcomes. The first row illustrates how tracking progress percent towards achievement of an objective compares to using a categorical rating of progress towards achieving the same result. If you are using both of these approaches to track progress towards a specific result, you should always check that the rating for the result update aligns with the progress percent update. If they don't align, then you'll need to check and clean your data to determine if an error was made in recording one of these updates. This is yet another example with a view from Marathi that illustrates the two approaches for tracking progress towards the same result. The result was wetlands restored. The chart on the left over here shows 3 years of results progress ratings as compared to the chart on the right that shows progress percent updates on the objective for the same result over the same 3-year period. As mentioned earlier, Marika provides you with 2 different methods for tracking achievement of objectives and goals. We just learned how to assess progress towards a given result by reporting on the degree of progress towards the objective or goal. Now let's look at that second approach, which is to measure the value of one or more indicators that represent progress towards achievement of an objective or a goal. So here you'll want to start by clicking on the indicator symbol, this purple triangle, for the objective or the goal, and this will open the factor properties box as seen on the right. Next, open the measurements plus future status field and click on Add. Your new measurement should include the date of the entry. As with other updates, you should work with your project team to enter an updated measurement as soon as an assessment is completed and provide details on what method was used to determine the indicator value and how that value compares with previous values. You should also indicate, as seen down here, the source of the new measurement of the indicator value. The source could range from a rough guess by your project team to an intensive assessment that uses a standardized protocol to generate quantitative or qualitative data with some estimate of statistical precision, which all can be recorded. It's likely that an intensive assessment will provide a more accurate value than a rough guess. But it's also important to note here that you will generally want to use the least expensive approach, that is, quote, good enough to get the data and generate the indicator value you need to make a reasonable decision. In some cases, a rough guess or a rapid assessment of an indicator value would be sufficient for making adaptive management decisions. For example, you may not need to know the exact number of seafood restaurants that are actively participating in the shark fin soup campaign. Perhaps knowing that the majority of restaurants are participating may be sufficient to feel confident that your campaign is reaching most consumers. But in other cases, an intensive assessment may be needed. For example, if you need to know if your strategy is effective at increasing the last population of a shark species that includes only 50 adults, you'll likely want to have a very accurate estimate of the number of adult sharks to know whether an increase has been achieved or not. Finally, let's take a moment to talk about cleaning and processing raw data. The value you enter for some indicator measurements will likely be an aggregate of raw data made up of multiple measurements. As shown here, the number of kilograms of shark fins imported into the capital city last year was generated by measuring the number of kilograms of shark fins observed in the market on the last day of each month over the past 12 months. This raw data needs to be cleaned and stored somewhere so that you can use it and aggregate and or process it. In many systems, such as Marika, you'll find that you need to store raw data in one place and report your roll-up data in your system. It's likely that you'll use spreadsheets, a database, or perhaps a statistical software to store and process the raw data. Before you aggregate or process your raw data, it's important that you clean that data. Here are a few best practices for data cleaning. First, check that you do not have duplicates in the data set. Also, check that you have not included any irrelevant observations. For example, in our shark fin case, you should remove any observations of shark fins in sites other than the per pond market, which are not relevant to your shark fin data set. Secondly, fix typos or incorrect capitalization that may lead to errors in your analysis. And then finally, check for any missing data in any of the fields in your raw data set. You may have to go back to the original data survey sheet to find that missing data or speak with the person who collected the raw data. Data cleaning is extremely important because dirty data can result in misunderstanding the effectiveness of your strategy and lead to poor decision making. Before we wrap up, let's quickly recap some of the best practices we've covered in this module for tracking progress towards achieving project outcomes. First, we need to manage all project data as they come in so they're clean, organized, and available for regular analysis. Secondly, we need to ensure that our project team has a common understanding of the progress ratings for results and uses the ratings consistently. Thirdly, you should ensure that your team provides details with updates on results, objectives, and goals that can help your team understand why an outcome is occurring or not. This will help your team determine if adaptive management action is needed. You should also identify the system or systems you're going to use to store any raw data that must be aggregated and are processed to generate an indicator measurement. And finally, you should clean your data to avoid errors in data analysis and reporting, which can lead to poor decision making. Congratulations! You've now learned how to enter progress updates for all the elements of your results chain. As we prepare now to transition into the next part of step 4, which is analyzing results, let's take one final step to update the overall progress of our strategy. After preparing your data, as we've discussed in the last 2 modules, you are now able to show the status of progress and results in this stoplight diagram of progress ratings for all of the activities and results that are included in this strategy's theory of change. At this point, it's important that you pause and reflect on what this image illustrates about the overall progress of your strategy. For example, it appears that most of the early activities and results in the early part of our chain are on track or completed, light green or green. And we see, though, that there's some issues with implementing activities and achieving results on the right-hand side of the diagram. Over here, we see some red and orange, not greens. After reviewing this image and the updates, how would you rate the overall progress of this strategy, which we could put over here in progress status? Do you feel the strategy is going as planned or on track, and the issues with achieving some of the results or some of the results are and can be addressed? Or do you feel that this strategy is perhaps not going as planned and that the overall strategy is facing issues, minor or major, that will require some changes in the overall theory of change? These may include changes to the expected results or changes to the activities your team is implementing to achieve the desired outcomes. This is the type of information that you'll want to consider and include when you add a progress update on your overall strategy. So, to recap what we've covered in this presentation, in this module, we've demonstrated how to answer a key question. Are we achieving expected outcomes? And if not, why not? We learned how to track and prepare the data we need to determine if we're achieving the expected outcomes of our project. This included progress towards achievement of desired results and various ways to track progress towards achievement of objectives and goals. Under tracking objectives and goals, we learned how to track progress % and how to track indicator values. We also did a recap of best practices for tracking progress towards achieving project outcomes and learned how to update strategy progress.